Amy Goodson is a board-certified specialist in sports dietetics, nutritional consultant, and a speaker spokesperson, etc., saying that gluten-free food you think you're eating might not be, after all. Amy, are you telling me that there's fraud out there when it comes to gluten-free food?
Well, when we talk gluten-free, sometimes we're talking about the amount of gluten that's actually in the food, and that's where the challenge comes in, especially when we're talking about restaurant food.
About what food?
Restaurant food. So the FDA has some pretty strict guidelines when we talk about gluten in packaged foods. So they have an amount. In 2014, they came out and said, okay, a gluten-containing food, or to be labeled as gluten-free, it can't have any more than 20 parts per million, which is 0.002%.
Okay.
But when we start talking about restaurant food, which is where the story came out, where a lot of people are saying, hey, I'm ordering gluten-free, and it's not really gluten-free. Well, though they should be following those guidelines, it's not as strict as some of those packaging guidelines that we're going to see in the grocery store when we're talking about purchasing gluten-free packaged food.
Now, do you find that the big chain restaurants are probably much more accurate than maybe your local restaurant that's been around for years?
Definitely. So they're probably doing gluten-free the same way, very strict standards, and following those FDA guidelines. When we start talking about a specialty restaurant or an independent restaurant, it's not that the restaurant is lying, but a lot of times there's cross-contamination. So maybe that restaurant is not gluten-free. I don't know that I've ever seen a totally gluten-free restaurant. So they're cooking with wheat and rye and barley and things that contain gluten, which sets other foods up for the opportunity to be cross-contaminated, which for the average person is not a big deal. But if you're someone who has celiac disease, which means you're allergic to the protein gluten, then we're talking some problems.
Well, yeah, Amy, that's kind of where my next question was going. A lot of people nowadays, they choose to eat a gluten-free diet for, their dietary reasons. But, you can't be screwing with that when somebody's really legitimately allergic.
Right. So celiac disease is the disease, like you mentioned, where you actually have an autoimmune response to gluten. So that means your body treats it like an allergy. So just like if you were allergic to a strawberry and had an allergic reaction, your body does that to gluten. And then there's another category that affects a small amount of people called non-celiac gluten sensitivity, which means they're very sensitive to gluten and often can have some of the same responses. So, for the average person, that might just be choosing gluten-free as a fad diet or a trendy fad or to try something new. Not a big deal. But when we're talking about people who actually have a health condition in response to gluten and going to have some different gastrointestinal responses, for people with celiac disease, if they're eating gluten regularly, it actually causes some of their nutrients not to be absorbed. So it becomes a lot bigger of a deal when we're talking about some of those people who truly do need to eat gluten-free.
All right, how dangerous is it? Like, for instance, somebody has a severe peanut allergy. There's a chance they could die. Same thing for gluten?
So gluten is actually a little bit different. Yeah. So gluten really affects the gastrointestinal lining.
You're going to be in
nutrients
pain.
Are going and being absorbed.
Okay.
And so what happens is when someone has celiac disease and they eat gluten, it flattens that lining, which causes malabsorption of nutrients. Okay. So that's one part that's negative. The second part is there can be a lot of, again, this weird word of gastrointestinal distress. So that could be, cramping, bloating, diarrhea, a lot of issues. And so they can actually get very sick. I've seen numerous people as a dietitian, have a severe reaction and be very, very sick to it. So where it may not cause death immediately, it can cause severe reactions for those people. And that's where the challenge is.
Fair enough. All right. Very interesting stuff there. So you think you're out taking care of things and you're really not. Amy Goodson, is there social media people should follow you on?
Yeah, so my Instagram is amyg.rd, and on Facebook, Amy Goodson Nutrition Consulting.
All right, Amy, thanks so much. We appreciate it. We'll do it again.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
Thanks.